Your outer world's a reflection of your inner world. And being in any kind of partnership is, I just see it as this holy, sacred mirror to anything that feels icky, off, uncomfortable. It's really just shedding light on a wound that's crying out for more healing or support or a need being met. And so, if we can turn from this bad othering, pointing our finger at like you are the threat, and see every trigger, every weird interaction as, hey, what is this bringing up? Maybe from my childhood or my past, and tending that root, that is where the power can be in your own healing, but also in the potential for connection with your partner.
Hi, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Sarah Yudkin, and I'm a relationship anxiety coach who's here to help you learn about all things love, relationships, and how to navigate anxiety in your relationships. If relationships are really meaningful to you and you've gotten any value from my videos so far, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to my channel and become a member of the You Love and You Learn community. This goes a long way to supporting me in this channel and makes sure that you don't miss any new videos coming out. And if you enjoy this video, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a like and a comment so I know what's resonating. Thank you for watching, and let's get into it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. I just got off of a great conversation with Becky Aste, who is a trauma-informed somatic relationship coach. She also hosts the Your Breakthrough Blueprint podcast. And after spending a decade researching and going through so many different mainstream modalities of healing, she found herself 2 kids later separated from her husband and on the verge of divorce. But at the final hour, she stumbled upon somatic work and working with her emotions and her body. And this helped take their marriage from dying to thriving. And so now her mission is to get her work and the work of somatic support, body-based work into the lives of every woman possible. So it was really great to have this conversation with Becky. She was so raw and real about her experience and sharing that even if there are challenges along the way in a relationship, it doesn't mean that the relationship can't work, but it does mean really understanding how our body works and how our body is wired to see things as threatening and learning how to find that inner safety. So I was really grateful to have Becky on. I am trying to have more open conversations about what it's really like to be in relationships with people and really get into the nitty-gritty of stories like these. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. Thank you for listening, and let's get into it. Hi, Becky. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Sarah. So good to see you.
Yes, you too. I'm excited to hear more about you and your story because we got connected through a mutual Instagram friend, and it's always nice to get to hear from other people who share a similar line of work and get to know their story and why they do what they do. So I'm excited to learn more from you today.
Aw, I'm grateful for that. It's the upside of social media. Somebody recently asked me, how do you make friends as an adult? And I was like, Instagram, my business masterminds.
Yes, 100%. I feel the same. Like with all of the challenges it does bring, there have been so many great connections that come from it. And I feel like the days that I hate social media, like the next day I find someone or something that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I found this through social media. So it's always that double-edged sword for sure.
Agreed.
Amazing. Well, for me, honestly, I've only glimpsed at like some of your story and I've seen like the hard-hitting points, but I'd love to know like the ins and outs, and especially if someone else doesn't know you or your work, like what led you to ultimately being a trauma-informed marriage coach, and like what even is that maybe for someone who doesn't know?
Yeah, so the backstory, I wasn't trying to do this. My husband was the one that planted the seed. You should try online coaching because he knew how passionate I was about psychology, the Enneagram, like loved connecting with people. And I was at a place in my career where I was thriving in a completely different avenue. I was like, no, I'm set, I'm secure. I would never jump ship. That's not what I would want to do. But backtrack, we got married really young, and pretty early on, we started this toxic dance that at the time, the only words I had for it was chase and run, where I felt
Mm.
like I was chasing, he was running, and I got really intrigued in self-development, just trying to solve this quote unquote problem of our dynamic. When we were good, but when we were triggered, it was like it erased everything. And So I learned words along the way, just diving into everything we're told to dive into, talk therapy and books and podcasts and couples counseling. And I was able to identify with labels like, oh, I'm anxiously attached and he's avoidant attached. And I relate to codependency and I see tendencies of addiction in him. And so I learned a lot of head knowledge along the way. But it honestly felt like after 10 years of investing time and money and energy and all of this stuff into our healing, we were worse off. We were separated at year 10 of marriage, after two kids at that point, and we were genuinely talking about divorce as a possibility because we were like, we've tried everything and it's only
Mhm.
like nothing has helped. So my world was flipped upside down. I mean, as an anxiously attached woman, that was my worst nightmare. It was panic attacks, it was insomnia, it was no, how can this be happening to me? And so I did what one does in a situation like that, like 2, 3 in the morning scrolling Instagram, and I find a coach. And all I knew of all the things that were not clear and upside down at that time, the only thing that felt clear is there is something about this woman's content pulling me in and it's resonating. And this felt like the first inkling of what I would later learn is my intuition or my gut of get in this woman's space no matter what. Like that's the only thing that's clear right now. So fast forward, I invested in her. She was my first ever big investment in the online coaching space, and it changed everything. She was the first introduction to somatic healing for me, which we'll get into. It's really just focusing on the neck down, whereas a lot of the modalities, actually all of them that I was trying was just from the neck up. And
Mm.
it changed the game of my life, our relationship. We're now thriving and married and surely not perfect, but it's a miracle night and day difference of where we're at.
Yeah. I love what you said about that was your first inkling of like what you now know as intuition, because I've had similar moments along the way where I was like, something about this resonates with me, or like a book that I read really stood out. Or, when I first heard the phrase relationship OCD, I was like, wait, like there's something where people are obsessing about their relationships. Like, oh, I want to learn more about that. And I think some people that I work with write that off as like, well, am I just lying to myself or convincing myself of something? But actually, when you're following something that clearly resonates with you or speaks to you, that can be a sign that you're trusting yourself. But I saw you post about this recently where you were like, these are pieces of advice that I wish would just go away without more context. And one of them was trust your intuition. And I think that word can just be so triggering for people who have a history of living from the head up because they're so worried that they're ignoring some deeper truth. So I'm glad you spoke to that right away.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it could be frustrating for people who don't even know what that feels like. That was me. And also, just if you're in a survival response, in a trauma response, your intuition is like, you can't find it in that state. You've got to do the work on healing the nervous system to even hear that whisper in the first place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned this chase and run dynamic, which is kind of like the patterns, but I'm curious, like, what were the things that either were happening that were maybe unhealthy or unhelpful, or what were the things that were not happening that needed to be happening with you and your husband that led you to this brink of potential divorce? Like, can you look back at specific things that were kind of contributing to that?
Yeah, what wasn't happening was communication. We swept everything under the rug. There was a constant third party in our marriage, and that was just the invisible elephant in the room where we would both feel the tension, we'd both feel the block, and we would not know how to talk about it.
Mm.
I would want to find closeness and try to engage, but I didn't know how to do it in a way that opened up connection. I just did it in a way that was very anxious and very clingy and very controlling. And so it would spark his avoidance. Sometimes he'd be sitting there, and we'd be trying to talk it out, but he was there but not there. You know what I mean? Like you are checked out somewhere else, buddy. And sometimes it would be actual avoidance. So there wasn't any kind of grounded communication over our conflicts or tensions. And then what was happening was there was a lot of the controlling behaviors, like really just me trying to find safety in connection, but checking his phone messages, seeing if there's any other girls he's talking to, checking his, internet searches, like, is there a pornography addiction here? I had had
Hmm.
past betrayals that my body was still hanging on to. And so I was finding myself constantly searching for that evidence that he was unfaithful and very hypervigilant, kind of caught in that state. And then him, on the other hand, just the addictive behaviors of soothing with drugs, alcohol, flirting, crossing lines with other women. Like I was also flirting with ex-boyfriends when we felt disconnected. It was on both ends and it just got very messy to that point of year 10 where we were like, what are we doing? This is not in alignment with who we are as humans, with our core values. Like, this can't be healthy. We need to try something different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm excited as we keep talking to get into more of like what is working now and kind of hearing more about those behind the scenes. But I'm curious when we're back to the point now where you're just reaching out to work with this coach and learning about the head down and how to work with your body and somatic healing. Like walk me through, obviously we only have an hour together, so you won't be able to tell me every single thing that you did in your whole healing journey. But like, what were some of the things you were learning that you didn't understand before you started coaching that have really helped you and your own intentions in your relationship?
Yeah, I remember on the initial just discovery call with her, telling her I've spent 10 years doing all the things, jumping through the hoops, and I'm still as indecisive as I was on my wedding day of should I stay or should I go? Yet I feel like I can't make a decision. And I remember her looking at me and being like, you will have absolute clarity at the end of these 8 weeks. It was like an 8-week program. And I felt really annoyed and kind of offended by that. Like, woman, did you not just hear? I've done all the things. You think your little 8-week program is going to give me clarity? But it was this humble, just, she was confident. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was like, this is just how it goes. And so, what she introduced to me was different because she was the first one to say, hey, there's absolutely no there's no point of trying to find clarity and an answer just through your head. You have to go into the body. Your body is hanging on to everything that you've lived through. Abandonment, your dad suddenly dying when you're 18, past trauma like betrayal, past spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, da 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 da. And so, in order to find that clarity you're searching so hard for and that connection with your husband again, we've got to learn how to first put out the fire of your nervous system. My nervous system was screaming. So it was not a lot of talking and it wasn't a lot of reading. Even her program, it was a lot of focusing on my felt sense body sensations. So this woman who was just diving into rumination and trying to figure it out intellectually, me all of a sudden was being coached to be with the sensations that were arising, the uncomfortable, spots in my body that felt tight or breath locked or muscles tense, instead of trying to escape those and go to my head to figure out a solution. It was an invitation to be with what was happening. And that was really annoying because it felt way too simple or not like groundbreaking enough. Like, woman, I've done all these intensives and now I pay 5K for your program and you're teaching me what like a kindergartner can, can do. Like, put your hand over your heart and sense what is going on in your body right now and be with it. And she was the first to point out how self-critical I was. It served me for a long time. The old pull yourself up by your bootstraps and muscle through it and helped me achieve a lot in life, but it was totally stunting my healing on an emotional, relational level. So inviting me to speak self-compassionately to me at first, which I was very annoyed by at first, like, no, I just want you to tell me the answer. So she slowed my roll. She helped me find my own somatic toolbox of resources to use in the moment. And sometimes that was things like the five senses, and I can explain what that is if needed. Box breathing, even tracing the outline of my body, just anything to come back into body and out of my head.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Are you referring to like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with your senses, or is there something else with
Yeah.
that? Yeah, if you
Yeah.
want to explain it in case anyone's not familiar, I'm familiar with it, but just in case someone else isn't.
Yeah, that turned out to be my go-to because I was super in my head. So whenever I was triggered, I would just name 5 things I could see, 4 things I could hear, 3 things I could physically touch, 2 things I could smell, and 1 thing I could taste.
Yeah.
And it would help bring me out of intrusive thought rumination land and back into my senses, back into my body. Sometimes for depending on the person, now I work with clients and I know not everyone is ready to go into the body. That's too overwhelming, too intense. And so we do, more resources outside, like feet on the ground or just noticing a cloud passing by, not something so close to home until they're ready to go into the body.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I realized the same things in a lot of the work that I was doing to better understand myself and my patterns, that I was being so hard on myself and that I was always up in the mind trying to figure things out. And even recently, I've been having my own kind of messy middle with what I'm doing in my business, like where I'm taking this direction of things. And I've been working with a coach where, like, even sometimes we'll just be sitting there and it's like, let's just sit with what's present and breathe into this and like hold space for not having the answers. And after a few minutes of actually letting my nervous system settle, almost every time I'm like, okay, like I trust myself, like I'll figure it out eventually. But when I'm coming into session, it's like my mind is buzzing with all these questions. And it's so true that we can do that in any moment when we're triggered in our relationship. But usually, when you settle a bit, it's not necessarily saying that you have to choose right then to stay or go in your relationship, but you're able, I find at least maybe you do as well, that you're able to see the situation from a little more clarity of like, oh, maybe I was coming at this from not the best way, or maybe we're both just a little overwhelmed right now and we need to revisit this later. Like you just get a little bit more of a sense of what's actually happening.
Yeah, that's the superpower that's so big that I felt like once I discovered, oh my God, I've been sitting on this my whole life. It was the game changer of, oh, there's a way to tell the difference between my intuition and my ego, or like love and fear. And so it was so confused for so long because my body was just in such a survival response that everything felt like a threat. Like even it could have been Prince Charming walking up to me, had never sinned in his life, and I'd be like, ah, you're gonna hurt me, because the nervous system alarm bells were going off.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you started learning all of this, would you say that by you having these inner shifts that things automatically kind of just started shifting externally, or were there still more of the like the skills you mentioned earlier, like communication? We didn't know how to sit and have a conversation. Like what was the balance of the inner work versus the outer work that had to happen for you guys to start reconnecting?
Yeah, Sarah, he was not on board when I started this. Like I remember we were separated. He was living with my his mom, and I was like, I invested in this program, and I told him a little bit about it. He was like, I hope that was with your own money, because I'd had my own side business. And
Mm,
he was just super like, good luck with that. Hope it works. Oh my gosh, can't believe you spent that much money.
mm.
And I was like, thanks. I need all the luck I can get. Like, I'm not sure if this is gonna work either. So definitely not, we didn't start on the same page at all. There was so much trust broken at that point, a lot of resentment between us. And so also felt like hard for him to see any progress because we were living in separate houses, and he would come over for dinner every night just to be with the kids. But when it started to really shift from just inner world, where I was so excited about that, it was like the first time ever I'm not just knowing different, I'm feeling different. I'm not able to just say, like, it's a good idea to be detached, right? And not codependent. It's like, this is what it feels like to feel safe for even if it's just a moment at first, detached from my husband and getting a sip and a taste of, even if we don't work out, like, I think I'm gonna be okay. I'd never experienced that in the body, just like, oh, that's a good idea. Wish I knew what that felt like. So
Hmm.
I was excited about the inner shifts, but what led to it showing up in my outer world or my relationship was this was during COVID time. And he came over one night when I went out for a girls' night to watch The Bachelor. I love The Bachelor. And I was like, you can sleep on the couch because I'm going to be back late. Like, you don't have to go back to your mom's if you don't want to. And so he did, but woke up the next morning and tested positive for COVID. And this was when
Mm,
everyone was like, ah, like nobody come near me. And so his mom was like, you're not coming back into my house with COVID. And so we're like, oh crap. All right. Guess we're under the same roof for at least 14 days. And I just honestly, Sarah, think that was a divine intervention because in those 14 days, we were interacting. And for the first time, we were able to have a different experience in communication. And he was able to share some truths that he had buried and not felt safe enough to share with me. And for the first time, I wasn't freaking out. I was,
mm,
instead of scanning his face and trying to figure out, are you even lying right now? You know, that hypervigilance. I was doing what my coach was teaching me, which was as he was talking, scanning my own body, like, how's my breath right now as I'm hearing his truth? Oh, it's open. Okay. And my muscles are relaxed and my shoulders are down and my head isn't spinning. So maybe I can trust him because my body, I'm learning, doesn't lie. And if my body is responding in this way, maybe I can trust him because I trust me
mm,
versus just the scanning and trying to figure out if he is trustworthy, if that makes sense. So it was a big shift. And those were the first little tastes of, whoa, what's happening here? Maybe there is a shot at repair. And so at the end of those 14 days, I was like, that was miraculous, whatever just happened there. I can't believe the breakthroughs we just had, but I need you to pack them, go back to your mom's because I'm still not sure. And
mm-hmm.
then his mom had COVID. And so we looked at each other and we were like, is this a divine sign again? And
Yeah.
so we both just decided just stay. He slept in the basement for a while. So that was the rest is history, though. He never moved out again after that.
Mm, wow. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it is wild to me just how much like the little shifts can make a difference. Like instead of scanning externally, like the shift to turn inward in that moment can actually make such a big difference and make sure that he felt maybe even safer to express. Because I know so many times I'll be working with a client and they're like, I feel like my partner walks on eggshells around me. And the challenging part is to admit that, like, I'm contributing to that because maybe there were times where I was very reactive and weren't showing up in this safe way that I want to be as a partner. So I think it's brave that you were able to admit, like, I was also contributing to these dynamics before, but then I also was part of the solution and the resolution to that. And I guess a follow-up question, because you were saying the piece about scanning your own body, um, back to the point we made earlier about how it can be confusing to discern like intuition and fear and all of those things. If you had been scanning your body and there was still fear, do you feel like there still would have been an ability to be curious about that and not automatically assume like there is an external threat? Or like what would you have done if you noticed internally as you were scanning there was still some sense of maybe discomfort or fear or uncertainty as a result of those conversations?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And that was something that took practice of learning, okay, just because I am sensing something in my body, it doesn't automatically mean he's hiding something from me or lying, that the curiosity can lead to the truth. So
Hmm.
instead of jumping to conclusions, it was a new way of living where I was learning to listen to the signals of my body and not see them as threats and learn the language of my own body, as weird as that may sound to some people. But our body, every place in it is connected to a different emotional center, or some say chakra, energy point. But there's a connection to different, emotional energy centers. So, for example, the throat, I used to just have a cough or, a sore throat or something and think that's weird. Let me grab a Theraflu and make it go away. And since all of this somatic healing, I've learned, wait, there's potentially something underneath, maybe a wound or some wisdom being held there that my throat is actually trying to communicate to me the next steps.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would learn if it was the throat, for example, to ask and be curious, what's going on here? Is there some kind of truth I'm afraid to express? Is there something that I expressed earlier that didn't feel fully authentic? Am I choking on something that I really need to get out? And I would play with that, like, okay, maybe that throat thing isn't him. Maybe it's I just need to express something. And so I would just try to play with that and see like what works. Sometimes it would be me expressing my truth in an example like that. And then I would feel connected and my body would settle and I would be like, ah, that was it. My body
Mhm.
was like helping me out. Other times, it was, I feel off and I don't know what it fully is, but I hear what you're saying, Sebastian. That's my husband's name, but something about that's still not resonating. I don't know what that's about. And give him the opportunity to either be a little more honest, and sometimes there was something deeper there, or if he's like sometimes not in touch, it's not even maliciously him hiding something, but he just wasn't in touch enough to really share authentically. I would just pause it and shelf it there. And I felt
Mm.
at peace knowing like I've at least spoken my truth. I've acknowledged that something's off and I could totally be wrong about that, but let's revisit this at a different time. Whereas old me would be like, oh, I'm overreacting. This definitely isn't my intuition. It must be
Mm.
me catastrophizing or relationship OCD or whatever. And I would just gaslight myself into shutting up.
Yeah, that word gaslight comes up a lot in my work. And I think one thing that I've since shifted my perspective on, I think I've always kind of thought this some way, but I didn't used to explain it in this way, is I used to have um, like this anxiety or intuition webinar that I would promote in this way of like it's either anxiety or intuition. But a lot of the times it's both and like maybe your need isn't getting met and your anxiety is telling you that means that like you can't make it work with this person. But like there, I think there's a world where we can dabble in both and like maybe there is a signal from your intuition that something doesn't feel quite right. But that doesn't mean you have to rush to go solve it or like break up with this person or that like they're doing something horrible to you. It's just a sign to get curious. So that word gaslight comes up a lot, and I feel like it's a buzzword these days, and people are always worried they are gaslighting themselves. And I think like the antidote for me at least has been just being curious about like, okay, well, can I explore what's here? I don't have to shut it down, but can I just try to understand it without jumping to conclusions about like what I have to do about it?
Curiosity is huge. I love that, Sarah. That's so powerful. Yeah, curiosity cures the client. It's true, you can never go wrong. If you're ever in that spot of indecision, or I don't know if this is anxiety, intuition, a mix of both, slowing down, getting curious, it can never, ever, ever hurt.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'd love to hear like now, obviously, you have been able to move through some of those much bigger challenges and like being on the brink of divorce and being together now. And I feel like from your story of what I see now, everything seems to be like it's in a great place, although not a perfect place, which I can attest to myself. But I'd love to know, like, especially as a business owner myself who's like trying to navigate these things. I'm not yet a parent, so that's an extra thing that you can maybe speak to. But like, how do you balance work, life admin, connecting intentionally with your husband, and then like also being a mom and dad together? Like, I feel like that's to me just something I've never seen modeled in a healthy way because I think my parents became so parent that they forgot about the connection of themselves. And then ultimately, they got a divorce when I was in my young 20s. So clearly, they eventually felt like they grew apart. So I'm curious, like, how do you balance all of the different things that you have going on?
Yeah, that's honestly the like forever trying to figure that out. Like there are so many moments and sometimes longer stints and stretches of time where I feel like we've nailed it. Like this is it. Life couldn't get better. It feels harmonious. And then it's like, woo, Mercury retrograde hits or whatever it is. And you're like, I have learned nothing. So my parents were the same way. They were very much the parents. They lost connection with each other. I felt afraid of repeating that. And that has shown up in my marriage, even in moments like where we have not seen eye to eye, where we've disagreed, is he loves having the kids sleep over in our room.
Mhm.
And for me, that felt like a major threat because I slept in my parents' bed for God knows way too long. And so I always equated that with, they didn't focus enough on each other. They
Mhm.
just were the parents, they forgot their connection, they ended up with a horrible marriage. And so it was interesting, whereas I saw that as a threat, having the kids sleep in our room, and he saw that as so fun and like, family time. So we've had to figure out a compromise there. And what we do now is just once a week family sleepover night. And as silly as this may sound to some, that's been a massive like growth opportunity for my nervous system to feel like that's safe and that's okay. It used to make me so anxious, like our marriage is going downhill because of this.
Hmm.
So it's like an area of growth. And then being an entrepreneur, that's like a whole nother aspect. And I've done very unhealthy entrepreneurship. I've been the hyperachiever, the workaholic that doesn't know how to turn work off. And I've gone to the other side of learning how to build from a place of peace, not a place of scarcity, and build from purpose, not from trauma. And I have been able to experience how good that feels. But in times of stress, I notice myself going back there. That's like a very top of mind coping pattern for me is when I'm stressed, go into the hyperachievement. So I haven't nailed it perfectly, but I'm so proud of how many shifts have happened. And it's just been a constant conversation with my husband and just trying new things that right now what's working is, I mean, my kids are both in school during the day. And so I am actually able to work just daytime hours. For a while, I did some nighttime. I decided to cut that out because it was interfering with me being present, with my family in the evenings. So now it's just daytime hours, and I try to end my appointments, giving me time to chill or maybe get dinner ready before the kids get off the bus. And just continuing to go back to an intention of who's the woman I want to show up as. Like, I want to be
Hmm.
a woman who really is in her purpose, and I feel that, but also really present at home and forgiving myself for the moments where it feels messy and icky, and I can just get back up on the horse without beating myself up as much as I used to. One really practical thing that has helped is I use ChatGPT. I put my eulogy. This may sound very dark for some people, but I wrote my own eulogy, basically of what I would want to be said about me at the end of my life. And I put that into ChatGPT and asked it to spit out for me a day in the life of me at 70 based off of that eulogy. And so it gave me this really inspiring little paragraph of how Becky lives her life at 70. And I recorded my own voice saying that.
Mm.
And that's my favorite way to start my mornings is just playing that 2 to 3 minute clip of me saying what my most aligned, authentic life is of me and my future. And so it sets this tone for let me start living her out now. Let me start
Mm.
the day slow with my coffee and start the day with intention, where the first thing I do is roll over and just touch or kiss my husband as an act of, beginning with, connection and love. Let me not rush into work, like all the things that feel so, me. It really helps me to listen to that to start the day and then try to live her out now.
I love that prompt. Even though yes, you're right. Like some people might think it sounds more, but I do think like reverse engineering, how do I want my life to look is so important, even if it's intimidating to think about, like being near the end, obviously. But thank you for sharing that. And as far as like the little touch points throughout the day or throughout the week, I mean, I'm bearing in mind that what you do with your husband might not be the same things that work for me or for everyone listening, but what are some of those little touch points, whether it is like morning or evening rituals or weekly rituals? Like, how do you stay connected? Because I know, especially for trying to be more securely attached, like having that balance of interdependence versus like independence is helpful. And I'm still trying to navigate like how much time do we spend together versus me time versus time doing things with work or friends or all those stuff like that.
I love that question, and I'll preface it with I used to hear people talk about this when we were at our worst, like caught in our most toxic dance. And it would be things like try, regular date night or check-ins, or like before you go to bed, say 3 things you love about each other. And I used to get furious hearing advice like that because I was like, I love that, but if I suggest that, he's going to have an attitude and he's going to see that as another way for me to try to control him or be so in
Mm,
his space. And so I just want to preface with that, just wherever the listener is, if that's where you are, first focus on what we talked about in the first part of this episode, the safety in yourself and in your nervous system, and learning how to really meet your own needs versus trying to have him meet your needs first for you.
Hmm.
But now where we're at, it's cool and it's still a pinch me thing that we can even have conversations like, hey, how often do we want to check in or have date night? And it not be a trigger and him not feel threatened by that. And me also not like needing it in an urgent, desperate, anxious way, but more just, hey, this is what I want out of partnership. So what's working for us now, at least, is we do Thursday dates during the day while the kids are at school. We're both able to request off during the day. I know that's not the same for everyone. Nighttime might be better, but we've started to pick up golf. He's annoyingly gotten really good at it really fast. I suck, but I still like to go hear the birds and whack some stuff. So, um, we have our money check-ins, which is a new area of growth for us. That's a whole nother episode, girl. Like that's not been a easy journey, but I'm really proud of just how much we've grown in that. So we
Mm.
start with a little money check-in, have a date on Thursdays. And then we're big throughout the week. Like if he's at work or I'm busy, we're big on sending each other reels, like dumb reels about the kids or, something, conspiracy theories, all of our inside jokes.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think it's so important for everyone to, like myself included, to reflect on like what does feel exciting or even just feel supportive or good. It doesn't have to feel like incredible every single moment, but sending those little reels or just a certain amount of days, like having a home cooked meal instead of eating out or, eating in together, like whatever it looks like is those little seemingly mundane things can be more enjoyable if we feel safe in our system and we kind of surrender needing it to be perfect and look a certain way. And I found that some nights when I have my guard down and I'm not kind of on that like hyper alert state, it can be really enjoyable just to have a cozy night on the couch watching TV together. And then other nights where I'm like, we should be doing more, we should be having
Yep.
fun. The same exact activity is not enjoyable. So it really is like, what is my inner state that's contributing to how I'm thinking about this situation?
Yeah, and I just love that you're open about it. It's really refreshing, especially just talking to another practitioner that has been kind of its own weird little mind effort is now I have this title where people know me as like the relationship coach, and it can add this added pressure of I should have the answers in my own, marriage all the time. And sometimes you're just so in it. Like I could tell other people all day what to help them renew their connection, but when I'm in it and I'm in my own triggered state, it's really refreshing to just be like, I don't care, what title I have. I just need help right now. I need help getting
Yes.
out of my own head. And that was this week. Monday was like a big, whoa, that conversation went down the whole real fast, and I was able to reach out for help, and repair looked so much different than it used to be, but it still happens. And I just feel like it's so refreshing to connect with you because you're not trying to put just your best foot forward either. You're like, I'm very much human still and have learned a heck ton of a lot, but I'm not claiming to have it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's been something I'm still practicing is like being that kind to myself when something like that pops up and like having my own back because if I'm constantly beating myself up for having a hard week in my relationship, like no one else is like really responsible for reminding me like that that's not true. Like they can do that, but I have to believe it. If someone's like you're being too hard on yourself, I have to be like
Yeah.
I am being too hard on myself and then actually practice the self-compassion because no matter how much someone says you're doing great, you're killing it, or your business is incredible, it's like if I'm still questioning things on the inside, it's never going to stick. So I 100% resonate with that. Speaking of conflict, you don't have to specifically go into the Monday example if that feels too fresh, but like what does repair look like for you now in your marriage compared to what it used to look like?
Yeah, I can actually share Mondays. I feel like I've processed it. It kind of came out of nowhere. It started with my daughter just trying to get her ready for school, and it turned into tantrums and then her getting on the bus crying. And something about that triggered something from, I mean, deeper in my childhood, where I was actually having a trauma response to that. Her leaving to get on the bus while we were still kind of disconnected and her not
Mm,
okay. And I was having this dissociative, like room closing in on me, dizzy feeling in my body. And I was like, whoa, where did this come from? And I didn't even have words for it yet. I was just trying to like ground myself with what was happening in my system. And Sebastian was like, what happened? And I felt intuitively that I wasn't ready to talk about it. Like I didn't even know what was happening yet. I felt like I wanted to get grounded. But on the other hand, I was like, how nice of him to want to understand. And he's moving toward me. So maybe I should share. And it turned into an awful conversation. It was so
mm,
unproductive. And it was him genuinely trying to help, right? In this typical dynamic where you see the woman just wants to be heard and not fixed and empathized with and told that her feelings make sense and you're not crazy. But he was jumping in a fix it mode and he was like,
mm.
well, you just need to set firmer boundaries with her. And I wanted to smack him in the face. I was like, I don't want solutions right now. You saying
Yeah.
that makes me feel like more of an F up. And so old me would have stayed in that conversation until I felt resolve, and that resolve would never come when I was in that state.
Yeah.
But what felt really healthy was me just being like, this is not going anywhere productive. I'm going to go on a walk and I'll be back. Old me never would have felt safe enough to do that. So I just went on a walk. It was simply hearing the birds frickin' chirp, Sarah. It was feeling the warmth of the sun on my face and my neck and calling a friend, having some like human connection who I trust, who I said, I need some coaching right now. And she like coached me through some breathing and helped me get to a really regulated space. And then I ran into my neighbor who I feel safe enough to be like, I had a shit morning, and she hugged
Hmm.
me and I cried a little more. So by the end of my walk, I was feeling super regulated, came in, and I was like, hey, are you open to talking again? And he was, and I was able to share in a way less blaming way. I came off very critical and accusing just like an hour before. And I was like, I realized what was going on was I got really triggered by Anna leaving. And what I was wanting in that moment was this. And I felt more, shame storm critical when advice was offered. And so maybe next time I can either go regulate first before talking to you or ask if you're really in a place to receive me in my unedited, messy, like haven't figured it out yet state.
Mm.
Which
Yeah.
is another conversation we've had in the past, which I was able to circle back to. Like, you've asked for the raw, unedited, and I gave it. And then I felt like the weird looks on your face or sensing your discomfort was more like an arrow to me in that moment.
Mm.
So we came to a good conclusion. I felt proud because I was like, that was the simplest, fastest repair we've had, and it just has taken a lot of practice.
Yeah. I love that example. Thank you for being open with that because those are the types of conversations I think that so many people who have the extra layer of anxiety on top of an interaction like that, it's already painful enough to have that moment where you need to repair, but then we get the extra messages on top of, well, that means we're not good at communicating, and that means like I need to either like go find a different relationship where it is better, or it's like we start getting into these whole like narratives around that. And I think it's important just to acknowledge like, yeah, there's going to be moments where misunderstandings happen and then you have to repair. And the more we can like approach it from that more grounded, conscious place, it will be able to happen more seamlessly.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Switch from an urgency of this needs to be fixed now to like I know we'll figure it out, which is huge. It feels freeing, first of all. It's
Yeah.
terrible to be stuck in the anxiety of like everything is urgent and is a problem to be solved immediately.
Yeah. And I forget where I saw it. Some reel or post that was going around recently was like, check in with you and your partner if you want one of the three H's, if you want to be heard, hugged, or helped. And I
Ooh, I
loved
love that.
that. And the other day, I actually was saying something because I had told Nate about it, and he was like, "Which of the three H's do you want right now?" And I feel like it's very new that we ever even talked about it. So this isn't something we've quite mastered. But I was like, if we can actually remember that more, like that is such a game changer to keep those in mind. Because sometimes I don't even want to be even fully heard. Like I literally just want to hug, and then I can like go
Yeah.
have my own moment, you know?
Man, I think in that moment, it would have been hugged. Yeah, I didn't want
Yeah.
to talk. I didn't want a solution. I wanted a hug. That's so helpful. I love that.
Yeah, amazing. Well, before we wrap and before I ask final questions that I ask all my guests, is there anything either about like things you've learned along the way in the relationship with yourself and how that's affected your marriage or anything in your marriage that you like share a lot with your clients that you want my listeners to know about? Like anything that we didn't include that feels important to bring in?
What's coming up is kind of nerdy, but seriously, if people don't remember anything but this before the conversation ends, it's that all of the stuff we talked about at the beginning that I tried from the neck up, the mainstream traditional modalities of healing, why it kept me so stuck is because when you learn how the nervous system works, there's this big nerve called the vagus nerve. It's the second biggest nerve in your whole nervous system. And you can think of it like the super highway of information. It runs from the base of your skull to the bottom of your spine. And chemical messages are constantly being sent up and down this vagus nerve from the brain to the body, body to the brain. Now, only 20% of those messages go from your brain to your body, but 80% of the internal messages go from your body to your brain. So, all that to say, it's no freaking wonder I felt so frustrated and would have spurts of like, oh, I felt better, but then the progress went away. It was because I was only working with the 20%. I was like a salmon swimming upstream. So, somatic work, nervous system healing, going into the body to move trauma out. The reason the healing happened so much faster and in such a lighter way is because I was leveraging the biggest part of the flow, of my system. So I would just encourage everyone to focus there, like learn, start following accounts, podcasts, whatever you can get your hands on about how your body works and how to regulate that first before you jump into the mindset work.
Yeah, I love that. And what you were saying earlier has been true for me. It's not always easy to practice these things, but a lot of the tools are pretty simple. It's just about like finding a safe way to practice them and to see little bits of evidence that they do work or can work in your own body. I know like sometimes it feels like, oh, I have to, go on a whole like yoga teacher training in order to heal myself. It's not necessarily that. It's just about little consistent actions, or at least I have found that those have been very helpful for me. I know I have room to grow in this area myself, but the little things do add up.
Yeah, yep, 100%.
Amazing. Well, a question I ask all my guests because this is the You Love and You Learn podcast. What is one thing you have learned about love that you would want to leave listeners with?
That going back to kind of the middle of our conversation, your outer world's a reflection of your inner world. And being in any kind of partnership is, I just see it as this holy, sacred mirror to anything that feels icky, off, uncomfortable. It's really just shedding light on a wound that's crying out for more healing or support or a need being met. And so, if we can turn from this bad othering, pointing our finger at like you are the threat, and see every trigger, every weird interaction as, hey, what is this bringing up? Maybe from my childhood or my past, and tending that root, that is where the power can be in your own healing, but also in the potential for connection with your partner. There are some like really, yes, messed up people in this world, but for the most part, at least the women that I work with, your partner is not an evil narcissist. He's not this like terrible person. He's doing the best he can with his own resources and with his own nervous system. And so, if you can see it as an opportunity for deeper healing for you versus a threat to your safety, a lot of power can be unlocked there.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And where would you want people to go to learn more about you and your work?
Instagram is where you can find me, Becky underscore Aste. And then you can check out my podcast, Your Breakthrough Blueprint, on all major streaming platforms.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so great to chat with you, and I'm excited to come on your podcast soon and have another awesome conversation, I'm sure.
Me too, Sarah. It's really easy to connect with you.
Yes, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in the next episode.